You're telling me White River State Park in Indianapolis is only 300,000
visitors?
It's
like 300,000 or 400,000
behind Yellowstone.
Yeah. It is the largest movie screen in the state of Indiana. Yeah, basically like our version of the Eiffel Tower or something like that was one of the original plans.
What is a hidden gem in Indiana? From South Bend to Evansville and everywhere in between, this is Get In, the show focused on the Hoosier State and the incredible stories happening here today. I'm Nate Spangle, founder of Get Indiana, and I will be your host for today's conversation. On the show today, I'm joined by Jake Oakman, Executive Director of White River State Park, or what I like to call Indy's backyard.
It's a good name.
White River State Park is a collection of 7 attractions in downtown Indianapolis, nestled up against the White River. These include the Indianapolis Zoo, Victory Field, the IMAX, Everwise Amphitheater, Indiana State Museum, NCAA Hall of Champions, and the Eiteljorg Museum. White River State Park covers over 250 acres and welcomes almost 4 million guests annually. Jake has been at the helm for the past 2.5 years, and in that time, he has set records for revenue and has grown visitation significantly. Today, we're going to be talking about what makes each of these attractions unique and how they all work together, the history behind White River State Park and its significance to Indy, and then we're going to dive into the impact that the park has on Hoosiers and what's coming down the pipe. Jake, welcome to Get In.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Man,
I hate to do this at the top of the show, but I can't take credit for increased visitation and revenue. It's a total team effort, so it's not just me that increased.
Yeah. It's not
coming
just
out of
you.
the pandemic helped, and all the attractions helped. So I would love to say,
what a great leader. Starting off, that's the humble Hoosier, right? I love that. Okay, great. So we're gonna go back and go. Jake has been at the helm for the park for the past 2.5 years, and in that time, he and the team have set records for revenue and grown visitation significantly.
That's accurate.
Jake and the crew. I love it. So the first thing I want to dive into, like when I think of White River State Park, and I'm going to be honest, now it's a little bit different, but before, maybe 6 months ago, before we held First Pitch Fest there, and I got to hang out with the whole crew down there, I thought White River State Park was just that little like greenway section that led to a bridge, and I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, and like little stair steps down to the river. I had no idea everything that the park encompassed and all the cool attractions that are there and the 7 different attractions. So what I thought would be a good intro to the whole podcast today would be, let's talk about each of those 7.
Sure.
Dive in just a little bit, so maybe some fun facts, and just like set the stage for what White River State Park really is. So we're going to start with the Indianapolis Zoo.
Okay. Yeah, you're definitely not alone. I think a lot of people don't understand the totality of what White River State Park is. So the zoo is part of the park. That was actually the first attraction to come to White River State Park in, like, I think 1988 is when 1987 or 1988.
Did we have a zoo beforehand?
We did. It was, I forget what park it was in. It was at a city park and then relocated to White River State Park in the 80s. And it is the largest privately funded zoo in the country. I think a lot of, the Columbus Zoo, St. Louis Zoo, San Diego Zoo, a lot of other zoos receive some sort of city or state financial support. Our zoo doesn't receive any support publicly, so that's why their membership is really important. Ticket sales are really important. Philanthropic dollars are really important, but it is the largest.
What is the zoo? Not Zootopia, but
Zubilation.
Zubilation. Yes, that is very important. It's a fun time.
I believe that's their largest fundraiser of the year.
I think it is.
And even beyond just having a zoo in the park, the zoo has this international reach. They're one of the largest and most respected animal conservation organizations in the world, and that's right here in White River State Park. They give out the Indianapolis Prize, which is one of the most respected prizes for animal conservation.
I was going to say there is this huge thing, right? The Indianapolis Prize, which is like, what's funny is Rally, this like innovation conference that's going on. They have the In Prize, and it's like a $5 million pitch competition. But it's fun to see the Indianapolis Prize, right? Is that
yes.
Yeah, and I've heard things and cool stories about how it goes to animal conservation.
Yeah, it's animal conservation. They award it every other year, and then in conjunction with that, they award a Friends of Animal. That's not the right term, but it's like a Friends of Animal Conservation award, and like Harrison Ford is a recipient of that. You may know him from such movies as like Regarding Henry or Working Girl or something like that. He's kind of a character actor who's made something for himself.
Maybe I've heard of that guy, not from any of those. So know your stuff when it comes to Harrison Ford. I was like, what? Okay.
Witness, another great Harrison Ford film.
Wow, we're really in his bag of Harrison Ford, his Ford movies. Well, cool. So we have the Indianapolis Zoo. It was kind of like, so before the zoo came there, was it just like a green space type park?
No, it was really just, I mean, the whole park, the whole footprint of White River State Park today was basically an old industrial zone for the city. So it was considered kind of out of downtown back then. West Street was sort of this barrier, and everything west of that was considered West Indianapolis. So where you see the zoo, the Eiteljorg, the amphitheater, and so on, years and years ago, those all had industrial history. And of course, like, you know, back in the day, you used rivers, or cities used rivers as basically that's how you got rid. So you would see a lot of factories and things developing along a river, and then the river took the waste away.
Yep.
And so the development of White River State Park was a huge way to reclaim a lot of that land. And actually, Washington Street, you'd mentioned earlier, the bridge that goes across the White River, that actually used to be the vehicular bridge for Washington Street. And so Washington Street used to basically go right through what is currently the Indianapolis Zoo. So when the zoo came downtown, it also led to the rerouting of Washington Street to what it is today. So it was a major just infrastructure project, let alone putting an attraction in.
Yeah. Well, we'll dive more into the history in a little bit.
Okay.
We're going to keep going through the line. So the next thing that I did not know was in White River State Park was Victory Field.
Yeah.
Until I talked with Randy. When like subtle plug, go back and listen to that episode. It was super fun.
Randy Lewandowski's a great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. And it was one of your original coworkers, bosses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago when I moved to Indy, my first job was with the Indy and selling season tickets. Top in the department, I might add, for 2 seasons. But
heck, top.
I hope Randy sees that.
Yeah,
but remembers that. Yeah, right.
Exactly. I love that. Okay, and so through that learning that they relocated in like 96
was when Victory, and that's what's amazing. Like, I'm a huge baseball nerd, so having Victory Field in the park is pretty cool. But the fact that stadium's almost 30 years old now. If you go to, like, when you threw the first pitch out recently, I bet you didn't think that, wow, this is an old 30-year-old stadium. I mean, they've done Randy and his team have done such a great job of keeping that stadium.
It feels new.
It does feel new.
It still feels like updated and new and nice, and that whole section really just feels new. Like I mean, White River State Park feels new when I look at it. Even though that's what you said. Not quite 30, right? 96, almost 30 years old. That's crazy.
Victory Field's 30 years old. The zoo's coming up on 40. I mean, the zoo opened down there in 87, I think, 87, 88. So,
wow.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, the new Sparkling Gem, we're going to get to it a little bit, but I mean, they do a good job. You guys do a good job, and each of your partners of like updating things and making it feel nice, new, clean, and amazing. Like, I love it. The next thing we're gonna talk about, right, is the IMAX.
Yes.
I don't think I've been to an IMAX movie in a minute. I need to probably change that.
Yeah, let's.
But like, talk to me about the significance of this. And I feel like early 2000s, like mid 2000s, like this thing probably ripped.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because when it was first built, like the IMAX sort of business model is they only show documentaries. So when when the movie theater opened in 96, 97, it opened before the State Museum did. They built the State Museum around the movie theater, which is kind of cool. And if you're in the building, you could kind of see like, oh, I think this is where like this used to be the exterior. But they used to just show sort of the traditional 30 to 40 minute IMAX documentaries. And it wasn't until 10 or 12 years ago that the IMAX theater, maybe a little bit longer, but started showing like first run Hollywood movies. Okay,
and talk to me, like this is going to show my noviceness when it comes to film and cinema. It's like, what makes the IMAX special versus like going to, Regal 33 or whatever?
Well, with all due respect to Regal 33, our theater is just a better experience. It is the largest movie screen in the state of Indiana. It has one of the most technologically advanced projection and sound systems in the state of Indiana. So I know, like, movie theaters, especially post-pandemic, a lot of things have gone to streaming. The movie business has been hurt from a exhibitioner standpoint. But really, our theater is the best place to see sort of event movies like Indiana Jones. That's another movie Harrison Ford was in, to bring it back. So Indiana Jones.
What movie? I've
so
never
there
heard
was
of
an
that.
archaeologist.
with the wrong Indiana. We talk
Right.
about other things in Indiana,
Okay.
not Indiana Jones.
My bad.
No, I love that.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is like a premium experience.
It's a premium experience. Great sound system, great movie.
How big? Like, how big is a theater? Is it one theater?
So we just have the one screen.
One screen.
Which is kind of a blessing and a curse. If you think about the movie business now, filling a multiplex that has 15 screens. There really aren't like 15 movies out at a time anymore like there were 15 or 20 years ago.
Man, I remember again, I was a senior in 2015, right?
Okay.
So 2014.
Senior in high school?
Senior in high school, yeah. So, but I would go out into the movies or whatever, and it was every theater was packed. Like it's a Plymouth, Indiana. I think it has 10 screens or whatever.
Oh, okay.
It's every
Is that where the
one
Blueberry Festival is?
That is where the Blueberry Festival is. Good work there.
Thank you.
But every screen would be full, and every theater would be full, and it was there was this movie and this movie, and they'd run for a month maybe, and then they're out. That does not seem like the thing anymore.
No, it's really, it seems like the studios really want to get their product to streaming as quickly as possible. Like I think Twisters, for example, was a movie we had at the IMAX. We had it for a couple weeks, and I think it's already available on streaming.
And I bet that one was an intense, how often are you going to the IMAX?
I'd rather not say,
okay,
quite
so
frankly.
yeah.
But, I have to know what's going on at the different attractions.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
part of the job.
It's just product testing.
It's research, exactly.
Okay, so, and I can imagine watching Twisters at an IMAX. That seems pretty intense.
But only having the one screen, back to your question earlier, it does give us a little bit of an advantage because, we can just pick the biggest movie that's coming out. We're only going to have it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on the schedule. So people know, man, if I want to see Star Wars or Twisters or whatever the big movie is that's coming out.
And you guys also do seasonal type stuff there, right? I feel like I've heard about maybe Polar Express or something fun that gets shown there
every Christmas. So Neil, the guy who runs the theater, Neil, he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of movies, and so Christmas time it's Polar Express, but then throughout the year he does special classic films. They did The Wizard of Oz a couple months ago. They did a James Bond movie series about a year ago. He's played the Godfather films there. So there's the new releases. There's still we still show the IMAX documentaries during the day for school groups and stuff like that.
Oh.
And then there's always a special event movie.
Where did the term IMAX come from? Do you know?
I do not know. I have no idea.
We might have to Google that one because I'm intrigued by it. But that's a story for another time.
I don't know if it was some guy's last Stan IMAX invented. I don't know.
Or maybe the guy's name was Max and he just wasn't very
IMAX.
IMAX.
Sam I Am.
Yeah, exactly.
Big Dr. Seuss fan.
Huge Indiana Jones guy, huge Dr. Seuss fan. All right, next we're gonna pop into what I think might be it's a toss-up between Victory Field and this one as my favorite attraction at White River State Park, and that is Everwise Amphitheater. Especially with the new build. I was fortunate enough 2 summers. When did the new permanent structure get built?
So it was 2022 was the first full concert season at the new amphitheater. So I think ground got broken in 2019, 2018, 2019, and then took a couple years to get built.
Because it had been temporary stage for decades.
Yeah, really. It's interesting. This year, 2024, is actually the 20th year that we've had a concert series out at White River State Park. So until the Everwise Amphitheater was built, they would truck in a temporary stage. There were no restrooms, no artist amenities, no permanent seating. It was just all folding chairs and an open lawn. And a lot of people like that. I get it was a cool ambiance, but
it's a different viewing experience now.
Oh, totally.
Have you been to a Rock the Ruins show up
Not
at
yet.
Holiday Park? Theirs right now is in that infancy stage, and I don't know if they'll ever get a permanent one. That's a park or whatever, but it's fun. It's blankets and lawn, and they give you some folding chairs up at the front. Great, super fun. But a 6,000 person venue, it's you at some point you gotta get a little bit of structure there.
We did, and then adding artist amenities, adding permanent restrooms, adding those sorts of things, it just also elevates the kind of acts that we could bring in and the number of shows we could bring in. We went from 10 to 12 to 15 a season when it was the temporary structure to now we're doing 50 shows a year.
Holy smokes. Well, there's where your revenue growth came from, right?
Right. That's why I can't take credit for it because it was...
Well, just music is hot right now.
Yeah.
No, my favorite concert ever was at Everwise.
Oh, okay.
So I've been to probably 50-ish concerts, right? A ton out at Ruoff, ton all around different states, or whatever. I saw Zach Bryan. He's a country artist.
I was there. I was at that show.
Now tickets for Zach Bryan, hundreds. I think I paid $300 at United Center in Chicago to see him.
Oh, wow.
It was $37. When he was still
more.
Yeah. And it was the place, my ears were ringing. It was a sold out show. My ears were, it was he was still like on the come up too. It was awesome. My favorite concert ever.
That was a great concert. That was a guy I didn't really know a lot about, but again, being an outdoor venue, I don't think I've ever heard an audience louder than that. Even at indoor concerts, I mean, the crowd was so into it and they were so loud, and it was just Live Nation booked him, I think, pre-COVID. And he kind of blew up over the pandemic, and concerts got canceled and stuff like that. So by the time, and it was great because he like still honored that commitment when even by that point he could have probably said like, put me in Ruoff, put me in someplace
he would have sold out Ruoff for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
well, he does now.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I don't even know if he'll play. I mean, he might come there at some point, but he's huge. Like, he could be at like. Potentially, you could combine him with the right artist and the right, like Lucas Oil.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so that was one where it was like you were saying it was like so loud. Like, it was deafening and it was awesome. So that's one of my favorite attractions at the park. The next one we go to is the Indiana State Museum.
Yeah. State Museum's great. I mean, their mission is to basically, they're the keepers of our state's history and our state's treasures. And obviously the State Museum, the actual museum is the only part of White River State Park, but their mission is also statewide. They manage all the historic sites throughout Indiana. So you think of Corydon and the first state capitol, Angel Mounds, the Levi Coffin Home, and on and on. I think there's 11 total sites throughout the state, but they manage all that. So they have this statewide responsibility, but then also the museum itself, they always have new exhibits to bring in, but also just like Indiana's history is right there in that building, and it's in White River State Park.
Have they been there? Like, how long have they been there?
So they opened, I think they opened in 2020, or excuse me, not 23, 2003 or 2004.
Was there a different museum beforehand?
No, so there was a state museum, and they were temporarily, at one point, they were in the old City Hall building in downtown Indianapolis. But like I said earlier, the IMAX existed there from the mid-90s, and then they built the State Museum around the IMAX, and it opened in that location in like 03 or 04. So they've been there for about 20 years.
Well, that's
now.
a good little field trip. You could take your
absolutely.
like, whatever class you have on there, go watch a documentary at the IMAX, and then hit the State Museum. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm a history guy, so this is super. I'm actually currently on a mission to know all 92 counties in Indiana based on their seat. So if someone tells me the seat of a county, then I'm like, oh yeah, that's Jennings County or whatever. So it's the opposite. So you know the seat of a county,
and then
I'll like, it'll spark the memory of what it is. So if you have like a county seat,
I don't.
Oh, okay. So it'd be like,
Indianapolis.
and it's Marion County, right? But it's like if someone says Plymouth, then I'm like, oh, that's Marshall.
Yeah.
Someone says South Bend, I say St. Joseph.
What started that interest?
I posted one video. Well, I have a giant map out in like my main office over here, and I posted a TikTok. I was like, I wonder how many I can get, and it got like 250,000 views of people watching me like recite counties in their capital or their seats. And then I was like, well, maybe I need to now learn them all so I can get them all. So it's like,
you should do, is there like, I know with the first pitch with the Indians, it was like if that video with Randy got X amount of views, they'd let you do a first pitch. What is your reward to yourself if you can do all 92 counties?
Well, then I'm actually moving into high school mascots.
Oh, okay.
So someone says like, "Oh, Beech Grove," and I'm like, "Go Hornets!" And trying to learn all those, and it's fun. It's just a little just a little way to like spread the love. I feel like a lot of times I want to make sure that my content focuses on the entire state of Indiana.
Sure.
And a lot of times it's like, I live in Indianapolis. It's easy to get like caught up in Indianapolis stuff, and so I'm being intentional of like, hey, I want to talk about Vivi, Indiana, which is the seat of Switzerland County, or
where the commercial wine industry in the United States began, by the way.
In
Vivi, Indiana,
they have
Switzerland.
the Swiss Wine Festival, right?
Yeah, and their history with winemaking predates California and Sonoma and all that over there.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to go do a little deep dive and get a little 90-second like the birth of wine in America, potentially.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna double click into that
and
one.
And it is like, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, but there's like certain, I think it's viticultural regions in the world, and like Southern Indiana is weirdly one of them. And then it's like, Napa Valley and
yes, well, because it's like
Valley
Oliver Winery and stuff. Like they like tap into that too.
Absolutely.
Like there's this region in Southern Indiana for sure. Like that's the thing I've also seen. Okay, back on topic.
Sorry.
I love a little rabbit hole. No, I'm all big all across the state. That's fun. We're gonna dive into the NCAA Hall of Champions, which like seems like something I would be interested in. I'm a sports guy, so talk to me about that.
Well, the NCAA relocated here about 25 years ago, and it obviously was huge for our state and our city. Their headquarters is in White River State Park, and they have a Hall of Champions, which is a public museum that highlights all Division I sports, men and women, Division I sports. They have a place where you can go shoot some baskets. They have some different like simulations for track and field events and things like that. And then they kind of have a small museum that you can walk through that just kind of tells a little bit about the history of all the Division I sports that NCAA
So did you like compare that to like one of the experiences at like the Children's Museum, like something like that, where it's like, hey, take your kids and like try to race Usain Bolt, or I guess it would be race a college D1 sprinter.
Yeah, it's definitely something like that. They have some really good hands-on exhibits. I mean, it's smaller than the Children's. I mean, the Children's Museum is like the biggest children's museum in the country, but it's smaller than that. But they do have some great hands-on exhibits and
like pop in there for a couple hour, like hour or two or whatever on an afternoon.
Then go to an IMAX movie, then go to the zoo, then go to the Eiteljorg.
So not an afternoon, so that's a full day.
Yeah,
but you could spend a full day doing lots of different things, and I think that's the part that we're gonna get to at the end. Is like you could spend a full day like doing different activities, and you end it with a baseball game or a concert, and you start at the zoo and you watch a movie. Like that's a weekend getaway, just in your park. Like coming on a Friday and you won't be bored, and you leave on Sunday.
Absolutely, yeah.
And all you have to do is like go find food.
Right.
Maybe eat at the park.
And we do have food there, yeah. And we got the hotels right across the street.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
all right. Final thing is the word that might be the hardest word to pronounce is the Eiteljorg Museum. Talk to me about what the Eiteljorg Museum is.
So it's a museum of Native American and Western art. So, and it's the largest collection of Indian art and Western art east of the Mississippi River. So it's really cool to have that in our park. But you just think of Native American as important as, Indianapolis, we're actually the land of Indians. So to have this great collection of Native American art in our park is really important. It's got a great collection. They also, like the State Museum, they'll have revolving exhibits, so there's always something new to see, new to come into. But their standing collection is fantastic. I mean, I love history also, and I'm a sucker for like old Western movies and things like that. So whenever I kind of walk through their galleries, it sort of reminds me of some of those old West movies. And then the cool thing about that is you get some of the accurate history. The old Westerns weren't necessarily the best from a historic standpoint for obvious reasons, but you get a good appreciation of all the different tribes and the different heritage of Native Americans.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if we even touch on it enough of like the rich history of Native Americans in Indiana, from like the Potawatomi to the Miami and like mounds, right? And all this like crazy cool stuff.
Yeah, Angel Mounds, another, again, managed by the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. And yeah, the history of our state, it goes back much further than just the 200 years we've been a state. Like it goes back to those native tribes and things like that. So the Eiteljorg and the State Museum are two great places to come and learn more about that.
Absolutely. Speaking of history, I think this segues perfectly into like the creation of this 250-acre green space / zoo / baseball stadium, concert venue, everything, right? It's like there's something for everybody there. I want to talk about like when did this thing get started and why?
It got started. So the governing body of the park is the White River State Park Development Commission, and that's a state. We're basically, I'm not going to bore you with bureaucracy, but it's basically, we're a state agency. We're a standalone state agency. So people hear White River State Park and they think we're maybe part of DNR state park system. We're actually standalone for that. But I think having state park in our title, we have a responsibility to like be up to snuff with how great the DNR properties are.
But like you, like Alec, who runs marketing with you guys, right? He's not like a deputy park conservation officer here.
Maybe he could be. Maybe we could get him one of the hats. Get him a uniform.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. That could be something.
Maybe.
But so
do you
that's
think that would push likes on social media? You're an expert in this field.
Yeah, if we dressed your entire staff up like the Canadian Mounties, I think that could work.
I don't know if those uniforms come in big and tall sizes, so I might be okay.
Okay, well, so that's interesting to say. You guys are separate from like others. Like when I think of the other state parks, like, and if someone was going on a bucket list of state parks, like, are you guys like in that bucket too?
I mean, I would hope so. I would hope we're on their bucket list. But like when you think of Brown County State Park or the Indiana Dunes or Turkey Run or anything like that, those are all managed by the Department of Natural Resources. And their director sits on our board, but we're completely separate from them.
Gotcha. So
but for like the normal people, they should not, they would have no reason to know that, and they just think we're a state park, and they should. And that's why, like, for as great as the DNR properties are, it like makes us keep our game up too, because we don't want to be a state park that's like every other state park is great, and then I went to White River State Park and it was trashy and it was this and it was that. So just having state park in our title is important for us to keep up with that level of.
I love that. See, I love like uncovering little like nuggets of like cool information and like knowing that like you are a state park, but you're different. Or there's a little asterisk. You guys are special.
Well, I mean, the easiest way to look at it is if you look at a traditional state park, its main mission is to preserve nature. Now, there's going to be trail developments, and some of our state parks have inns and stuff like that. But for the most part, they're preserving a piece of property. We're a developed urban campus and obviously has all these cultural amenities and things like that. So, like, our mission is developing the asset, whereas DNR, and this is like really, it's more complicated than that, but DNR's mission is preserving the asset. Ours is developing the asset. So that's kind of like...
Well, if they're ever looking to develop more of the state parks, like maybe we get some more concert venues, like the Indiana Dunes, like Everwise Amphitheater. Like I'd be game for that.
I
Could
don't know.
be fun.
But I don't know if I want the competition though.
Oh,
I mean, we've got this great.
That's fair. You're right. All right.
Then you'll be like, Jake Oakman oversaw a decline in revenue because all the concerts.
Went up to the dunes, a little
yeah.
dunes beach bash. Back to what this is the 70s. This
late 70s is when the Development Commission was created, and really it was like we talked about earlier. Was just there was this kind of wasted former industrial manufacturing hunk of land.
Is that like that land that stretches all the way down to like where Diamond Chain is? Like that whole like corridor in there?
So we don't have anything. So Diamond Chain is not part of the park, but it would have been like
back in the day,
yeah,
like that would kind of be like where it's like like if you're envisioning it, you're downtown on West Street and you're looking like you're going south and you're looking to your right and you see, you know, where the Diamond Chain building and where the Indy 11 or whatever stadium like might go, maybe will go, maybe won't go. All in through there along the west side of the road. Like that was all just like rundown factory stuff.
Pretty much.
Man, I'm gonna like look up and see if I can find a picture
But then even
of that.
like if you look at where the State Museum is today or where the NCAA headquarters are, I mean, I think where the Everwise Amphitheater today at one point was like a meat processing plant. So that's where like cattle met their demise. And so there were, you know.
And do you guys like sell burgers out there? Like that's like a full circle of life. Like
we do, but we truck in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just checking.
It's not. It's farm to table, but it's a distance.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's all rundown, like old school industrial manufacturing. Then the city or the state comes together and says we need to do something with this.
Basically, they said we need to do something with this. So there was a lot of thought put into what to do with that land. I mean, obviously, you could see what it became today, but I mean, I think back in the day, there was thoughts of putting an amusement park in with roller coasters.
I had that in my fun facts section, right? That the two things that the White River State Park could have been was a 7,800-foot tower.
Yeah.
Which is like just a skyscraper or like just a tower.
Yeah, basically like our version of the Eiffel Tower or something like that was one of the original plans. It would have looked a little bit differently, but I mean that was basically let's get up in the air.
Let's get a tower. Like they say Indiana's okay. I kind of think that Everwise is cooler than the tower, but like people travel around the world to see the Eiffel Tower, so that's fair. And or
it's okay.
the other
you can see it at Kings Island too.
Yeah, right.
So.
The other option was an amusement park.
Yeah,
which like low key could have little like Six Flags Indianapolis like could have been fun.
Yeah, that would have definitely been a different feel. But there's a park in Copenhagen, I think, called like Tivoli Gardens or something like that, and that was the inspiration, one of the original inspirations for White River State Park. So some community leaders went and visited that, and those gardens in Copenhagen, they do have roller coasters and Ferris wheels and what's the one with the horses, merry-go-round?
Oh, yeah.
And stuff like that. So obviously we didn't do that, but...
I mean, are we fully rolling that out? Like, you know, maybe there's more land to be acquired here or there?
You know, never say never, I guess. But the zoo has a roller coaster, so there is...
okay, so there is amusement to be
rides at White River State Park.
Okay. And so we start to go through there. You guys decide that we're just going to build not you guys, but the guys, the people, the leaders of the state that put this together decided we're going to build a state park. And then started getting attractions to come into the park.
Yeah, I mean, basically my understanding was the zoo had kind of and again, I'm completely spacing on where they originally were in Indianapolis, but they had kind of outgrown their location, and they were the first ones to move in. And then the Eiteljorg, so like I said, I think the zoo is 87, 88, and then the Eiteljorg was shortly thereafter, and then the IMAX, and then Victory Field. Well, and the NCAA came in in like 94, I think, 98, something like that.
Because I feel like the move of the NCAA from Kansas City was huge
Oh,
for
absolutely.
the state. And like that ended up attracting like USA Football and USA this and USA that and like all these other like sports organizations. So the old zoo used to be located at Washington Park between East 30th and 34th Street east of Keystone. So probably up by the fairgrounds then, if I had to imagine. Like somewhere up in there. So as we dive in then, right, who was like leading? Like, do you know like who the guys or gals or whoever the people were that were like championing this project of the White River State Park?
I mean, there were a lot. It's one of those where if I started listing people, I'm sure I would forget important people. But one that comes to mind who we just lost recently was Jim Morris, who was the chairman or vice chairman of the Pacers until he passed away a few months ago. And he's somebody who'd always been supportive of the park. But both state and city leaders have been supportive throughout the years. And it's just been one of those community assets that, like, you know, people in the public sector, people in the private sector, leaders from both parties, Democrats and Republicans, like everyone has, in their way, has supported the park over the last 40 years to get it to what it is today. And so there's no like one person who could say I was the founding father of White River State Park. It's this community. It was really this total community effort that got it to where it is today. I
love that. And that's like what I love about Indiana when you think about it. It's like when there's something that everyone can decide that this is good and the state's going to benefit from this, like people come together and like make it happen.
Absolutely.
And it's like, you know, I've heard the story of Jim Morris like coming in and like helping with being a good steward of White River State Park and a champion of that. So I love that. But like, what does this mean for the city and for downtown Indianapolis, like having White River State Park be part of it?
I mean, I think it's a huge asset for the community. I think if you look at when people talk about wanting quality of life, wanting different amenities in a city that makes cities more livable and makes them more attractive places to visit, White River State Park plays a huge part in that. So not only is it sort of the economics of, you know, X amount of people have jobs there that, you know, they're contributing to the economic impact of the area, but we have this asset, White River State Park, that is also these collection of museums and attractions that are the absolute best in the country at what they do. You know, like we said, the zoo's the biggest, you know, privately funded zoo. The Victory Field's the best minor league ballpark in the country. The Eiteljorg is the largest collection of Native American art this side of the Mississippi River, and on and on and on. So, like, they're the best at what they do. They're all right here in White River State Park, and I think it just elevates our city and state to have that downtown. And then also from, like, a livability standpoint, as people want to live more in cities and people can do remote work and things like that, like, these are the type of amenities and attractions that business leaders can recruit quality workers to come and visit. And if you live in an apartment, you had mentioned that you like to call White River State Park Indy's backyard. And in many respects, that's true. If you live in an apartment complex in downtown Indianapolis, you know, the best green space you may have access to walk the dog or go for a run or whatever. And I guess people go for runs. I'm not a runner. But
I do. I mean, is the canal walk? That's a piece of White River State Park.
So we have the canal basically up to West Street. So everything west of West Street is part of White River State Park. And then when you get east of West Street and go up to kind of where it terminates at the IU Health Complex.
Well, like that whole like run the Colt Canal. It's an awesome. I mean, for people who like to run the canal. It's a great little like. A little loop that takes you in and around there.
When you come out, like where you had your event,
towards that way.
Yeah, the Canal Elbow, and then you have Celebration Plaza, which is that big open green space.
That'll take you down to like the step amphitheater type looking thing.
Right into the river. Yep.
Yeah. I think that area is just so beautiful and cool. I go out there, and whether you're going to have a picnic or, or you're on a little run, it's amazing.
And that's the thing, like, it's obviously we're this park that has attractions and has scheduled events like baseball games and concerts and all this. But you can just come and hang out too. Like, you don't have to come.
Like, you know, you bring a hammock or some spike ball or whatever it is. And it's like hang out. It's a great time.
Yeah.
I like agree. What I want to know, I have like a personal question.
Oh
here,
boy. Okay.
Is like 2.5 years in, what made this job appealing to you?
Like, the idea of being able to help manage this asset for our community is something that appealed to me. The different, you know, having worked for the Indianapolis Indians, I used to work in the park, and maybe back then I didn't even realize that I worked in the park. But just being able to help manage the different attractions, being able to help manage this great cultural asset. I mean, you know, when the opportunity came open, when my predecessor retired, it was like, man, this would be pretty cool if it all worked out. So,
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's super cool, and it's like full circle moment, right?
Exactly,
Like when you first, where are you from originally?
So I grew up. Well, I was born in South Bend, but I grew up in Springfield, Ohio.
Oh,
North
okay.
High Panthers. If you're interested in,
See, I didn't know. I didn't know. I don't go across state lines, but I do know.
well, that high school doesn't even exist anymore. So
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am from like up in the just south of South Bend.
Oh,
like
okay.
like I'm probably 15 minutes from Plymouth east.
Okay.
So
So wait, is that like Napanee?
oh, close.
Okay.
So it would be Bourbon. So if you
Now you're talking my language.
There we go. So if you
We go
take,
from Napanee apple pie
yeah
to Bourbon.
Bourbon, Indiana, which again, I've said this on lots of episodes, but if there was ever a market for a distillery that needs to be created, it's Bourbon and Bourbon.
Right,
Like B squared. Come on. As we kind of wrap up on like talking about the park and that before we get to like some fun sections that I have for you, I want to know like what's coming down the pipeline. Are there like future developments in the work? Are there things that we're kicking around or talking about that we want to see happen at White River State Park?
Yeah, so on the West Bank, and this is public knowledge, I mean, Elanco is building their global headquarters at the former GM stamping plant site. So that's a site that's south of West Street on the West Bank of the river. I wish I had a map.
South of West. We'll get
South
a little
of
map. In
West,
there. I know where that because we
north
run.
of East,
We run pretty close to that. If you do the Indy Mini.
Yeah,
Does that take you kind of okay? Well, there's a route there. So yeah, but I know they're building that at the old GMs because there was this whole big thing about what's going to happen to the GM stamping plant.
Well, at one point too, I think like the plan was to build what became the Everwise Amphitheater over there. It would have been bigger, but we're getting a strip of land that's about 12 acres that'll essentially go from Elanco's front door to the river, and then north and south it's contained by Washington Street and Oliver Street, and so. That'll be just really nice riverside property on the West Bank. So we're working on developing that into
on the West Bank. So that's like stretching across the river now.
Yeah.
Well, it's on the same side as the zoo.
That's the zoo.
Gotcha.
And that's the thing. The zoo, since the zoo's on the other side of the river, a lot of people don't always associate that with White River State Park. So being able to do more on the west side and kind of take advantage of the zoo being over there and things like that's exciting.
Did Oregon have to approve putting their duck into the river from you guys?
Yeah.
They did.
They did, yeah.
So you get a call. You get a call one day. It's like, I'm the athletic director at the University of Oregon, and I'd like to put my duck in your river.
I said that'll be $3 million.
Yeah. Well, did he
no,
actually?
That was a joke. That was a joke. But yeah, they had to get approval, and they had to talk to us and DNR.
Where did they launch it from?
I think they just it just inflates, and I think they just inflated it down there.
Oh, so he's like, they just walked down and imagine being the guy whose
that thing was
job,
huge.
Imagine
too.
being the guy whose job is to be like the inflatable duck operator.
Right.
Like
that's a heck of a LinkedIn profile. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or it's just like you're sitting there and like it's starting to inflate and you're like, Mom, what choices did I make that led me here in life?
Or you get to travel the country and inflate
so you knew that was
duck.
going to happen like well before it was. Oh, you were the insider.
I was, yeah.
Well, hey,
and I'm
next
not an
time-
Oregon fan. I mean,
it's
kind of weird that they're in the Big Ten now, but
it's super weird. But it would also be cool to see like. I mean, I don't want this to happen. I want like a traditional Midwestern Big Ten school to win the Big Ten, but like an Oregon USC like Big Ten championship in Indianapolis this winter would be pretty cool.
I just don't know though. Would their fans travel all the way out here? That's what I would worry about. Like, would Oregon fans come to Indy for? I hope they would, but
Yeah. And while
Coach
they're here-
Sig and the IU Hoosiers are going to win like the next 10 Big Ten
Oh
titles. so
boy!
It's
All
a
right.
new era.
Yeah,
it's
a
the
new
Coach
era.
Sig era.
Yep, I love it. Good luck. I wish you nothing but the best.
I mean, he ran out Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh didn't want any part of him, so he left the Big Ten. Kalen DeBoer, he left the Big Ten.
I mean, you're right. Like all the signs point to Coach Sig.
It's Coach Sig's world, man.
Maybe we should get Coach Sig on the pod.
I think so.
Coach, if you're after the season, let's
Send him
talk.
this clip. I'm sure he'll
Yeah.
be anxious to get on.
Coach Sig, if this gets 100,000 views, will you come on the pod?
If he can name every county seat in the state of Indiana,
exactly.
Coach Sig should be in this.
And we start with Bloomington and Monroe County.
Yeah,
Come on. All right.
91 to go.
Let's talk about so future developments. You're getting that new strip. You have Elanco coming in from over there. As you think about more broadly, right? Downtown Indianapolis in general, as we're recovering from COVID, there's some work. Like what are just your thoughts about like what you're seeing in downtown Indy?
I think it's starting to come back. I feel like this year, 2024, has been sort of the first normal year that we've had since post-COVID. And what I mean by that is like both 2022 and 2023 were really good years, but I think a lot of that was there was a lot of pent-up demand or frustration or whatever because we went 2 years where you basically couldn't do anything. So people came out guns blazing in 22 and 23, especially like the concerts, for instance. You know, everyone who could get on the road from a touring perspective went on the road because they couldn't make a living for 2 years. So I feel like in certain respects, 22 and 23 were a little bit inflated, and 24 seems like
kind of like an overcorrection.
Yeah, basically an overcorrection. I think like 24 we're seeing a return to normalcy, and it seems this is just like anecdotal from my perspective, but it seems like the pendulum has swung back a little bit on like remote work and working from home, and so I think you're starting to see more people come back to offices. So that's great for the vibrancy of downtown, especially during the afternoon, getting more business traffic in. I mean, we've always been strong on events. Visit Indy does a great job getting conferences here.
I know I'm having Leonard on the podcast in a few weeks, and we're going to hear.
He's going to do a lot of talking. So get ready.
I love that. I was an Orr fellow, and our first like monthly meeting that we had was Leonard. He came and talked to us about how, and it was like, I was inspired afterwards. Like, we're going to be the Paris of the United States and the River City and all this stuff. And it's like, hey, like, you know, the 35 or 66 foot Eiffel Tower at the Olympic swim trials or whatever. Okay, we're on our way.
He's got I won't spoil it for you, but he's got a great line about Paris and Indianapolis, and I'm sure he'll use on your show. So
can't wait.
But yeah, he does a great job, and his team does a great job on getting those big conventions and conferences. Obviously, we've got this great sports reputation. So hosting, I know Sarah Meyer from the Sports Corps was on your show a few weeks ago, hosting the Olympic trials, getting the Final Four here, the college football championships. So like we've been good there. But just kind of that day-to-day activity, I think, has been a little bit slower to come back, and it's starting to, and I think that's great for the vibrancy of our downtown.
Well, when you're not at White River State Park, where can we find you hanging out?
Really, I'm at home a lot. I hang out with friends. Like my days of going out on the town are kind of behind me.
I mean, like just like if we were to see like, hey, what local places are you hanging out at that you want to give a shout out to?
Well, I mean, the IMAX at White River State Park. No, I do like, there's some restaurants and places along Mass Ave that I enjoy, like Salt, I think is a good restaurant. Yeah. Union 50, we were talking about bourbon earlier. I think I haven't been there in a couple months, but they've always had a great whiskey selection. The Garage at the Bottle Works.
Are you heading up to Circle City Industrial Complex, like in that little section too? There's some cool stuff being built, where, like the folding warehouses, and was it 8th Day, I think, is in there too. Yeah. There's some cool stuff up there.
There's some cool stuff, and that whole like Mass Ave just kind of keeps extending northeast, which I think is good. But I would say like socially, most of my time out in downtown would be along Mass Ave now. Or really, I mean, I know it sounds cheesy, like I'm supposed to say it, but I do spend a lot of time at the park, even outside. I love movies, so I do go to the IMAX. I go to the concerts. I try to hang out at the zoo. They got that new chimpanzee exhibit. So.
Well, if you're ever looking for like fun place to park, extra tickets to White River or to Everwise, like please send them our way.
We can do business. We
absolutely!
I
love that. I saw there was a few. Was it Parker McCollum? Did he bring out? Or no? Who brought out Caitlin Clark?
I think,
or was it Jordan Davis? It was Jordan Davis brought out a couple fever players.
See, I went to the Beach Boys earlier this season, and they brought out John Stamos, Uncle Jesse from Full House. So,
in Indy?
Yeah. Apparently, he tours with them on occasion.
That's kind of dope.
Yeah. He did a good job.
Like, Uncle Jesse, what are you doing up there? All right.
He played drums and guitar. Very talented man, that John Stamos.
This guy is a movie TV buff. I love it. We're going to get to a couple fun segments here as we wrap up the day. We're going to start with our Younger Years segment. So this question is brought to you by our friends at Orr Fellowship. They're a great organization here in Indianapolis helping develop young business leaders across the state. They just launched their newest chapter in Evansville. They're doing great work. I was an Orr Fellow. It's amazing. Awesome. So, Jake, our question is, what advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
Just be a little bit more intentional in how you're getting started in life. I think, I was probably like a lot of 22-year-olds after college, where I was just kind of floating along and I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Except for your Rookie of the Year 2 seasons.
Yeah, but that didn't happen until 2 years after I graduated. So I graduated. I sort of had this year and a half in the wilderness, where I sold cars for a living, got fired, worked at Macy's. Which I'll probably go back to at some point. And then I finally...
Wait, is Macy's still a store?
Hey, come on. Yes, it is.
All right.
I own 3 shares of Macy's stock, so I've got to watch out for...
He is a shareholder. He's an owner.
I'm an owner. I'm a part owner of Macy's. It's not doing too hot, I'll tell you that. luckily it's only 3 shares. Like I don't have to. I'm okay.
He hasn't bet the farm on Macy's.
Not yet. It's coming back. You know, retail's cyclical. We'll be fine. Macy's will be fine. If you're watching, buy Macy's. It's a great value right now.
And this is your reminder that we are not certified investment professionals.
Right, yeah,
Like this is not financial advice or guidance.
Right. Talk to your Edward Jones advisor,
gosh, yes.
and then get in on Macy's while you can.
Edward Jones will be getting an invoice from me for the ad spots here.
That's good.
Just making sure.
Can you send any my way, just like a little
gotcha.
Let me wet my beak a little. But yeah, I mean, it took me a while to kind of figure out life. And I think, you know, you don't necessarily have to know what you're going to do for the next 40 years of your life when you get out. But I wish I would have been a little bit more intentional with like relationships, not just like romantic relationships, but professional relationships, and kind of being a little bit more disciplined about how I was meeting people or presenting myself or trying to get things started in my career. And, you know, just kind of, I would just tell a 22-year-old me to grow up a little bit. Okay, and maybe lay off the carbs. Those would have been my...
Maybe lay off the carbs.
Lay off the carbs.
All right,
Those would have been my 2 pieces of advice.
I like that. Now we get into the lightning round. 7 questions. You know, give me a little anecdote about it, but we don't need to go into super big detail about it.
Okay.
Just like, you know, quick hitters. So for the lightning round, here we go. These first 4 questions rotate. These are specific to you in White River State Park.
Okay.
So which attraction in White River State Park brings the most guests annually?
The zoo.
And how close? Like, is that like a close battle?
No. I mean, I think they do over 1 million, and then Victory Field does like 600,000 or 700,000. So those are the 2
So you think
most,
you're getting almost 4 million, and it's like 25% roughly is coming from the zoo. That's pretty cool.
more or less, yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dr. Rob. Thank you for that.
Yeah. How many events are held annually at White River State Park?
Oh man, I mean, you could literally say hundreds, depending on how you want to define
You're
it.
talking about 50 concerts.
Yeah, 50 concerts.
80 or 70 something.
72.
Baseball?
Well, it was 72 when I was there. So, but yeah, 70, 75 baseball games, and then all the events that go on at the Eiteljorg, that go on at the State Museum. Then we have like Pride Fest. The Mini goes through the park, and anything from just like there's a wedding on Sunday, just a small little rental. We're not invited. I'm not suggesting that.
Wait, are you officiating?
I don't know. No, my track record in that department's not that good. You don't want me officiating your wedding. That I can tell you. Don't take my investment advice.
Yeah,
and don't have me officiate
your wedding. Okay, cool.
So I mean, you could literally say hundreds of events a year.
Yeah. I wonder if there. I bet if we went and looked, I would love to pull the number from the calendar and be like, hey, we had 1,264 events. Like you know, from based on because there's like times you could have something going on at Eiteljorg, something going on at a baseball game. Like you could have over 7 events in one day.
Absolutely. Well, and also like I wouldn't want to be too cute with the answer, but like if we had a movie at the IMAX, like when we had Oppenheimer last year, I mean those were sellouts. We had 70 straight sellouts of Oppenheimer.
70?
Yeah, that's the other thing I should have mentioned earlier is the other cool thing about our theater is like we're one of only 30 in the world that's left that has a 70 millimeter film projector. So like when we had Oppenheimer, it was showed on film instead of digital. And we were one of the only theaters in the world, and that Christopher Nolan wanted you to see it on film. And we were like, so we had people driving from Minnesota to watch Oppenheimer in our theater because of that projector.
That's badass.
So if we consider that an event, then I mean, yeah, I don't think it would be unreasonable to talk about 500 to 1,000 events in White River State Park a year.
That's awesome. Okay, what's been your favorite event ever? You don't have to pick a favorite attraction, but single favorite event. You're like, this thing is just really cool.
Now I would say it was the solar eclipse that happened back in April. Because I'll tell you, I was one of these skeptics for a year and a half. That's like, who the hell? I mean, you look up and it's like, okay, it's dark now. This is fantastic. And we're planning this for 2 years, and people are driving. I didn't get it. And then we had the largest free festival for the solar eclipse. We had about 30,000 people in the park they showed up at like 6 a.m. to like get their locations to view this thing. And then when it happened at like 3 p.m. or whatever it was, and the whole place went dark, and like people started cheering, I was like, okay, I get it now. Yeah.
I mean, I was also a skeptic. I was like, what is it? And then I was like, well, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. And just to have that many people in the park on a Monday, and we had food trucks, and it was just a really cool atmosphere. It was a really cool environment. And then just like the eclipse itself was, again, going from somebody who was like, okay, is this really a big deal, to like, okay, yeah, now I get it. It was that was probably been my favorite event in the park so far.
I love that. Last question that's specific to White River, and then we'll get to the three main ones. What's your favorite artifact at the Indiana State Museum or exhibit?
They had an Abraham Lincoln exhibit, and I know they have a pretty extensive Abraham Lincoln collection, and they bring out one of the amendments that passed when he was president, and I'm totally blanking on what it was. I want to say it was the 14th Amendment, and then also the Emancipation Proclamation. They have like a signed version of the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, that's not on permanent display in the museum, but they do bring it out on occasion for display. And those two, you can actually see him, you see his signature. You know it was actually Abraham Lincoln who signed that, and that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. And like penmanship was pretty good back then.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking 1860, whatever. Our final three questions of the lightning round. These are the ones I ask everybody.
Okay.
We're going to start with, what's something the world needs to know about Indiana?
We're a lot more dynamic. We're a lot more interesting than I think people give us credit for. We're not, I think sometimes, we don't have as many big cities as Ohio. We're next to Chicago. We don't have, everyone talks about what Indiana doesn't have. We don't have mountains. We don't have this. We don't have that. But I think like we have a lot of really cool stuff. And I think sometimes Hoosiers are a little bit too humble about our state. And I would say we're not just a flyover state. We have a tremendous, vibrant, dynamic capital city in Indianapolis. We have a beautiful shoreline up in Northwest Indiana. We have some of the most photogenic rolling hills in Southern Indiana. We have great college towns. We have a great sports community, and we have a great culture of sort of Hoosier hospitality and helping each other out and things like that. And that's not to say that we're not without our problems and there aren't some things that we could do better, but I just think that like Indiana is a much more dynamic and interesting and fun and exciting place to be than maybe we even give ourselves credit for, let alone people outside Indiana give us credit for.
Amen. I love that. Jake.
Yes.
What is a hidden gem in Indiana?
I would say Owen County, Brown County is beautiful, and Brown County rightfully gets a lot of attention and a lot of credit. I think Owen County has as much natural beauty as Brown County, and maybe people just don't think about it. Also, McCormick's Creek, which was the state's first state park, is in Owen County.
Ooh, that's a little tidbit. McCormick's Creek was the state's first state park?
Yeah, and then they have a thing called Cataract Falls, which I don't think is actually a state park, but it's a beautiful natural area. So
yeah. Okay, wait. IN.gov says explore Indiana's first state park, McCormick's Creek.
Yes.
Boom. That's pretty good. Good for you. All right, so we're saying Owen County.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're going to love it.
Yeah.
There's also Amy Brown from Authentic. She's the CEO up there.
Okay.
She talked about the Sleepy Days Fest. Gosport.
Okay.
Gosport Lazy Days Festival. I think that's in Owen County. I'll go fact check that one too, but they do the bed race and it's pretty cool.
I just think county, I know this is the lightning round, but also we talk about these fairs and festivals. Indiana has like an incredible collection statewide. We talked about the Marshall County Blueberry Festival. Napanee has
500,000 people go to the Blueberry Festival.
It's nuts.
Crazy.
And then there's, I think one of the biggest living history festivals happens at Mississinawa every year, which is like further east of where you're from. There's the Park County Covered Bridge Festival, which is a little bit west of Owen County.
And that's like a 10-day festival with I don't even know.
And that's hundreds of thousands of people come to that. And every community seems to have, there's a bacon festival in Delphi. But just that sort of culture of fairs and festivals throughout the state. You could
spend an entire summer and be gone every weekend have a good time and probably gain hundreds of pounds.
That's what happened to me. I went on the fair circuit and here I am now.
There we go.
Yeah.
Final question of the lightning round. Jake, who is a Hoosier that we need to keep on our radar?
Danny Lopez.
Ooh, tell me. With the Pacers?
Yeah, so he's the vice president of something for the Pacers. He's a big community leader. I worked for him in Lieutenant Governor Holcomb's office. I worked with him in Governor Holcomb's office. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's just a great guy. And I think he's somebody that has the heart of a servant and continues to want to give back to this community. I mean, he's a great friend, so I'm, not an unbiased observer. But I think Danny Lopez, we need more Danny Lopez. That's what Indianapolis needs more of. To go back to your earlier question, is more Danny Lopez's.
Downtown Indy needs more Danny Lopez's.
Yeah, give me 20 Danny Lopez's, and I think we'll be fine.
Amen. I love it. Jake, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing. You and the team are doing at White River State Park. It was fun diving into all 7 attractions and all the cool things you have going down there. The potentially thousands, we're going to look into it, but maybe there's thousands of events that you guys host, the millions of people that you bring through the park every year. It's amazing.
We're only like 300,000 visitors behind Yellowstone National Park. So one of my goals is I'd love to get more visitors than Yellowstone. So if you're listening, if you're watching, if you haven't been to the park, help us get those numbers up.
You're telling me White River State Park in Indianapolis is only 300,000
like
visitors?
300,000 or 400,000
behind Yellowstone.
Yeah. We're a top 30 visited park in the country by visit. And again, that's the sum total of all the attractions and people who just come through to walk their dog or whatever. But yeah, we're a top 30 visited park in the country, and we're like 300 or 400,000 behind Yellowstone.
What is the number one most visited park in the country?
Central Park in New York.
Oh,
and they're like at 18 million, so it might take us a couple years to get there.
But
let's get Yellowstone. We'll pass Yellowstone first, and then Central Park, we're coming for you.
I love it. There it is. Jake, thank you. This was so much fun, and keep up all the hard work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This episode was brought to you by our friends at Hard Truth. They are an amazing Indiana distillery that is absolutely crushing it. I just went down to Nashville to check out their operation, and it did not disappoint. We went on an ATV tour followed by a tiki cruise, and then rounded out the visit with a full tour of their distillery. I learned so much about whiskey, bourbon, and some history of Brown County. Then we ate dinner at their restaurant, and it did not disappoint. Mark your calendar for Harvest Fest on September 28th. They're releasing their third collaboration with Mellencamp Whiskey Company, and will have live music as well as a meet and greet and bottle signing. Festivities run from 12 to 9 p.m. with the whiskey tent opening at 2. Get your tickets at hardtruth.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Get In. If you liked what you heard, make sure you leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. This show was made possible by our friends up at Sweetwater. Whether you're trying to start your own podcast or looking to take your show to the next level, make sure you check out sweetwater.com for all your creator needs. If you want exclusive behind-the-scenes content on all things Indiana, make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nate Spangle. Thank you for being part of what makes the Hoosier State so amazing. We'll see you next week here on Get In.